Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. Lots to talk about today. Yesterday we did Ask Me Anything thing, and we do that from time to time because we're interested in what you think, but also because the news cycle seems slow, and then all day long, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. One thing happened after another, and we wake up today to the Allahu Akbar Professional Golf Association. What in the world happened with the PGA and LIV, or however, I don't know how you're even supposed to
LIV
pronounce it.
Golf, and it's
A year ago, they were at one another's throats, and you were banned from participating in the PGA if you played in the LIV League. And now, why can't we be friends? What, the Allahu Akbar League? What's going on?
Yep. So the PGA and I guess the PGA 501c6 sort of tax exempt entity that holds all of the, I guess, intellectual property rights and that kind of thing. They announced yesterday via Jay Monahan, who's I believe the CEO of that. I've got the letter up on the screen. We can go through some of the elements thereof, but this was a complete surprise. The backstory here is something that you and I covered some ages ago when LIV really first started making waves, announcing a tour, and we talked a lot about the deficiencies in American golf, as it were, the staleness of the game, the fact that it could be a growing game, but that there were high barriers to entry, that players had an interest in faster pace of play. There's this new social media world and content creation, and ultimately the PGA was not being a good steward of the American game of golf, which is what led to the void in the marketplace that LIV sought to fill. And when we covered this, there was the issue of the PGA forcing its players to choose, saying that you may not at all participate in both LIV and in the PGA. And this is where the split began. And this is where the discord and the disruptions, and as Jay Monahan calls it, distractions, began. And, for the last, several years, I guess, it's been a very polarized world of golf, right? The more traditional, civilized, as people see it, PGA Tour. Tiger Woods didn't jump ship and go to LIV, and I read somewhere where he left hundreds of millions on the table, and so I guess dedicating his loyalty to the PGA. But others made the transition over to LIV, and what we have seen today is that the PGA and what is known as the Public Investment Fund have announced a joint venture of sorts. It's sort of a merger and acquisition announcement. But what is going to happen is there is going to be a new combined legal entity formed, and they say name TBD. There, you can read that on the screen. But ultimately, the Saudi-backed Public Investment Fund, which is $620 billion strong, has reached an agreement to essentially make the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan look very silly for the types of words they were using and the position it took, and ultimately the way that they hung the players out to dry. And they have gotten a seat at the table. I'll go down a little bit just so we can talk about the merits.
But it's hard to get, for me, excited about golf. I've got a confession to make. I don't golf. I don't watch it. Although the other day I came home and I needed to get some exercise, hopped on the exercise bike. All my go-to sports things were done. So I turned on golf, and it was riveting. Apparently a player who'd been injured would returned, and he did quite well. He didn't win, but he was in the mix at the end. And of course, you listen to the hushed commentators, and they're easy to mock. During the Proud Boys trial, Steve Metcalf and I adopted persona. He represented Dominic Pizzola. We pretended that we were BBC announcers at a golf game doing the trial. Well, the judge is prepared to take the bench, and a hush falls over the room. He's approaching the bench. He sits down now, and he considers grabbing his gavel. No, it won't be necessary. Court has been opened. It's not exactly a riveting kind of follow the ball kind of game, although it is. And so I gather it's an enormous cash cow. And whether LIV's acquisition or merger with the PGA is good for the game or not, I simply don't have the ability to say. But the rapid about course from the PGA suggests all sorts of economic uncertainty for players. Justin Carta in the chat says, Phil and others got huge payoffs to join. Now what? Well, the other players will get nothing. I mean,
yeah, that's right. Yes, correct. And that's why the PGA and Jay Monahan look completely silly. The widespread criticism of Jay Monahan is that he needs to resign because he was outwardly hostile to the notion of LIV. He went on every major public broadcast that he could appear on and threw dirt on their name. And he agreed that these players that were leaving the PGA were essentially defectors, right? And created this sort of principled divide between those that would remain as loyalists to the OG, right, the PGA, and those that would change their stripes and go and join LIV. But here's the rub: what does their loyalty get them now? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I don't know how to react to this story. I mean, the notion, golf, I guess, the Scottish game, the PGA is a quintessentially American experience. It seems to me, even though the announcers seem to come from another planet. But now we're going to join. This is going to be the Golf Globalist Network, and we're going to have tours around the world, and somehow the Saudi government's putting its thumb on the scales of this game. Is that good for the game? There was a humorous tweet from Senator Chris Murphy, one of Connecticut's United States senators, yesterday, apropos this announcement. He said, it's odd this should happen. There was a PGA person in my office moments ago complaining about LIV and its association with Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia's bad human rights record. And do we want them in the game? And now suddenly the Saudis are going to control this quote unquote civilized game, or as Eric Dickinson puts it in one of the chats, it's uppity. It's an uppity Bud Light kind of sport. So we now approach the 18th green.
Lawyer Will says in the Rumble chat, he basically called LIV golfers, LIV golf supporters of 9/11, and that's right. And there's been a tremendous amount of pushback on LIV, and they, the PGA up until this point have leaned into it. Now, what I have on the screen is that there's obviously an end to whatever pending litigation is going on between them, which I think I just have to assume that if one is legal counsel to the PGA and whatever that litigation is, that there is a low grade threat of a loss of the monopoly that the PGA enjoys on professional golf in America. And so that this is almost an existential move by the Board of Governors in an effort to preserve whatever market share that they do have, and create a bigger pie rather than lose market share. Now, one thing that is interesting about this, and will, I think, signal something larger than just the substantive merits of the sport. And I'll say I think that this is actually good for the health of the sport as it will be played. And that's just because I think that the PGA now unlocks the ability to diversify its tournaments, diversify its methodology in terms of what it offers, and so that it will meet a new generation of golfers where they are. What LIV has done is demonstrate.
What does that mean? We're going to have the Palestinian Golf Association join?
Think about how long a golf
during Ramadan. I mean,
think about how long the golf outings typically are: 4 hours, 18 holes, very stuffy. Guys that are less than average at the sport getting really irritated and lacking in self-awareness because they're never going to be a Tiger, and have really weird expectations. What LIV does as a product is shortens the game and emphasizes the experience of golf in a way that caters to the younger demographic of people looking to access golf. So look, it's not an either or thing, Norm.
I guess, but wait. I followed enough baseball to appreciate the efforts made to streamline the game. You've got 20 seconds to pitch, and you've got to address the ball. The batter has but one timeout, and so forth. And so the game does speed up. They've made some alterations to fielding rules and to the sides of the bases, and the games seem to be a little more exciting this year. And maybe we're appealing better to an attention deficit deprived generation. But how do you speed golf up? And do you need to speed golf up? Mark Twain was never a golfer. He once said that golf was a good walk wasted. I've been on golf courses and accompanied, and I've played a couple times. I mean, I won't call it playing, but it's a nice day out. I don't really want it to be fast. And as to the game itself, do we really want to change the game to accommodate?
No, I don't.
viewers?
Look, I love a slower pace of play, but I think what I'm saying in terms of shortening the game is literally shortening the length of the course, right? So 9 holes instead of 18. Not that there aren't 9-hole courses now, but in terms of the way, because we reviewed all this, Norman, I think we may need to at some point go back and unearth what LIV does really well in terms of it.
We should.
In terms of a fan's ability to track players that they like, and giving every player an ability to win through these tournaments and stuff like that, rather than just arbitrarily getting rid of 99% of the field before a certain.
Oh, wait a minute. Are we saying everybody gets a prize? You show up and you're going to get a reward?
Saying the fan experience is more consistent, right? That's it in terms of a watchable game. And by the way, the PGA Tour is still the PGA Tour. But here's where we go, because I know that you have a hard out at 8:30, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. But in the interest of assessing these themes of legitimacy and to give us something more meat on the bone here to chew on, the new chairman of the forthcoming entity between PGA and LIV is one Yasir Al-Rumayyan. And here is his surreal resume, right? LinkedIn all-star, if there ever was one. He is the governor of the Public Investment Fund, which I've already said is he oversees a portfolio of $620 billion worth of active investments. He's also the chairman of Saudi Aramco, the oil juggernaut. He is the chairman of Newcastle United, and he is also a board member at both Uber and SoftBank. And if that's not enough, he is effectively the regent or the chief of staff, the consigliere to the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. So what this entity is ultimately getting is a value system that is currently, and I think that this is where the gap may be bridged. Do you think that this newly formed entity is going to have anything to do with Pride Month?
Well, there is that,
And do you?
On the other hand, there'll be no golf during Ramadan, and if you make a bad remark about Muhammad, they beat you to death with your golf clubs.
That's not true at all. That's not true at all. Do you also think that perhaps this new entity will want to promote gas-powered vehicles and reliance on fossil fuels? Do you think that this new, you understand where I'm going with this now? Why
can't the game just be a game? I don't want to.
Because every single professional game is a marketing vehicle wrapped around surreally athletic and gifted players, right? That's what it has become in the modern era.
But I don't really want global values in a game that I'm watching on my television. I just want to relax. I don't want to be politicized with it. Every time I turn on the television, sports are the only thing I can reliably watch on TV these days. I mean, I've told you one of my stand-up gigs is, did you see the new advertisement for the fertility drug? Black couple. A white guy, a couple, a white guy, a black woman. They couldn't produce a child, but they took Miracle Grow for the womb, and now they're the happy parents of this bounding little toddler, and they got an Asian kid. I mean, we've denied reality so much that, and we've come to prize diversity so much that we're straining every opportunity to politicize people, and you almost never see straight white people on a commercial anymore because that's bad for business. And now we got to politicize golf too.
No, I think that, look, it's a counter signal at worst, right? Because if you're looking at the Saudi fundamental principles, you're not looking at the same sort of globo diverse pride flag waving. Whatever, right?
T-girl, I agree. I will guarantee there will be no Dylan Mulvaney themed gold balls.
Yeah.
And then she writes, I meant golf balls. Well,
Right.
yeah,
No, that's
emphasis
right.
on the balls.
Yeah. Well, look, so T Girl says they are calling it a sports washing, kind of like buying carbon offsets. But I think that ultimately, in terms of the culture war, we saw that Donald Trump last July almost, I mean, it was like he's throwing a dart and hitting double bullseye with his eyes closed in a Truth Social post where he said that this was going to happen. He predicted that all of these players pledging loyalty to the PGA were going to be left out to dry. And guess what? This happens, right? He called the inevitable merger. He called it an inevitable merger of these two things. So I think that from a populist perspective, if we can think about institutions that we used to cherish for their ability to just allow the individual to do things that didn't involve having the right opinion, I actually think that this is a great counterweight politically to what's going to happen. I know that it seems like, I know that right now that there is a logical extreme to where this could go. But look, if fossil fuels find a way back into the public consciousness, away from this weird sort of EV world that we've gotten into, if we don't have to be inundated with this sort of diversity for diversity's sake and having the right opinion, virtue signaling, like LGBTQ plus pride flags, whatever, I see that as a net positive. And I also see it as a net positive that golf's key demographic, young athletic men, are going to have a place to begin co-locating where they don't have to worry about being chastised for having the wrong opinion. That's what I guess is my optimistic lens on this.
We're going to have to revisit this because I'm just with Sigmund Freud on this. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar and it's just a ball and it's just a club and there's the hole. Go stick the ball in the hole in as few strokes as possible. That's all I want to see if I watch golf. But let's pivot. So we talk from time to time here, or perhaps all the time, about the Bill of Rights. And you know what the First Amendment protects: freedom of speech, freedom of association, the right to petition peacefully for the redress of grievances, and so on and so forth. We know what the Second Amendment protects: the right to bear arms. We know the Fourth Amendment talks about being secure from unreasonable searches and seizures. We know the Fifth Amendment guarantees certain rights to criminal defendants, including the right to remain silent. But we skip the third. Nobody ever talks about the Third Amendment. What is the Third Amendment? Well, I'm going to arm you with some information for your water cooler conversations today. The Third Amendment prohibits the government from quartering or requiring you to put soldiers or strangers in your home. In colonial times, when Britain was trying to hold its empire, as it were, it sent soldiers over to the United States, and there weren't hotels, and so from time to time they'd be parked in a person's home. And so, what the Third Amendment says: no soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. Now, obviously, the plain meaning of that language applies to soldiers only. And so it leaves open the question whether the government can compel someone to be quartered in your home in a time of peace who's not a soldier. I think the way this law will be interpreted, this amendment will be interpreted, if it's ever given civilian application, is no government can compel a person to take a stranger into their home. Are we beginning to open a door to a consideration of that as maybe necessary to meet our responsibilities in the world as global citizens? What am I talking about? You're aware of a border crisis. You're aware that migrants are flocking to the United States because, for all our troubles, we remain a destination nation. And, you know, I'm not aware of counter-migration tendencies where people are fleeing the United States to go live in, let's say Saudi Arabia, where they can do live golf and whatnot. The border crisis has created a human problem. What are we going to do with all of these people? And so some of the border states have begun to ship people elsewhere to try to create pressure on other jurisdictions to do something about immigration. To New York City, for example, where there are many many migrants who have been brought to the city at the government's expense, dumped there, and the city is being told, now you deal with them, and there's no place to put them. The hotels are filling up, and it's a costly thing. And so Mayor Adams is thinking, hey, and you know, people who live in the city talk about the city's transformation. There are blocks that are now unpleasant to go to, and there are people basically warehoused and dumped on the streets. Mayor Adams suggests, hey, got a vacant bedroom? Maybe the city will give you some money to house a person. Maybe what if we gave you, in that spare bedroom of yours, $125 to put in, this person who just came over, in El Paso, let's say, and we'll give you $125 per head. So his wife and his child, you could make $375 a month. That's a lot less than a hotel is paid to house that person. And it makes use of extra space and is a good and efficient use of social resources and builds utility and could be good for the world because you would be a better citizen of the globe and of the United States if you shared your wealth. Doesn't all that sound nice and kumbaya like, and why can't we be friends? You open that door to the possibility that if the need is great enough, maybe you should be compelled to open your home to a stranger. I mean, think about global inequality. How many Americans own more than one home, for example? In a world in which people are homeless, do we need to own multiple homes? Or for those of us who are getting long in the tooth, my wife and I are older. We're getting, the next big step for us will be the eternity drop, right? Our kids are out of the house; they've got kids of their own, and we've not downsized. Do we need all the space we have? Wouldn't that space be better off serving a young family on the way up, a young family from Guatemala, let's say, or El Salvador, who might be living in a hotel room right now, or perhaps on the street? So maybe this space should be taken from those who have too much and given to those who need it. Maybe if a couple or a family owns two homes, you can only live in one home at a time. Pick the home that you need, and give the other one to the government, or if the just compensation clause, have the government buy it at a fire sale so that it can be given to a migrant family. Just I'm looking at comments in online. Photography says we're spot on with this. Scary. Justin Carter says it's never going to happen. I don't know.
Yeah. So Justin, I think that is, I disagree with you that it'll never happen. I think it already has. And I want to make sure that I give credit where it's due. I follow a gentleman named Adam Townsend on Twitter, and Adam Townsend during the lead up to 2020 and then throughout 2020, especially with respect to COVID and the widespread closures of businesses, the rapid printing of money, the juxtaposition of that sort of, protect your neighbor, 6 feet distance, stay home, etc., alongside the 2020 riots, Black Lives Matter, etc., was a signal. And he calls what has occurred in America during the last several years the fastest roll up of power in all of human history. And he says that the elites have solved the problem of power leaving, right? The impermanence of power is what he would call it. From this lens, my concern with this is that the metropolitan areas of our city, of our country, have been largely vacated because of the conditions of living in the city, because of the fear of the virus, because of the necessity of feeling some sense of autonomy in one's life. And those who have the ability have certainly moved in all other areas of the country. And commercial real estate in all of these major metropolitan areas is teetering on disaster. And what I see happening right now is that these cities are importing new demographics of voters that will support the collectivization of rights that they themselves never even conceived of having because of where they largely come from and the cultures and areas and the poverty that they come from. They will vote in favor of whatever the public handout ultimately is, that paternalistic government presence. And for that reason, there is a real issue with Adams floating this idea of compensating people for hosting asylum seekers, not even those that have been given asylum, but just asylum seekers, those who are actively in the non-citizen, non-visa, non-lawful entry
No,
area.
what's going to happen? You know, what's going to happen when you decide to take the family in as a humanitarian gesture with benefits and you're getting your $250, $375 a month stipend, and then it doesn't work out and you ask them to leave. I suspect at that point they're going to have something to say about it, and an eviction law will compel them to remain in your home. I say once this door gets opened, it inevitably
This is
leads
hell. This is hell
yeah,
in the making, and
it,
even more than that, photography. Yes, eviction laws have been extended to help the people not paying rent. I think that correct. You know, the issue here is that what if a private individual makes a contract with the city and they agree to accept compensation in exchange for hosting someone that they don't even have an opportunity to vet? What do they do if they want to expel that family and stop taking the payments? Where does that family go? Where do those people go? And how does the justice system even account for this stuff?
And
That's
then once you begin having those discussions and the need becomes great enough and the borders become overwhelmed, we decide simply that everyone is entitled as a basic human right to a certain number of square feet,
think about
and that
how
the government, as the allocate enforcer of those rights, will allocate them at the expense of those who have,
it's
giving it to those who don't. And then the
Chinese
Third
finger
Amendment
trap,
comes into
right?
play.
The Chinese finger trap kind of thing. And then think about this. I know we'll pivot. But the last thing, because I put this on here, you know, Mayor Adams talked about needing to roll back what are regarded all over the country as short-term rental laws. New York City has a law that forecloses anyone from having what are known as short-term rentals, such as Airbnb, anything like that, for longer than 30 consecutive days. Um,
Mm.
and so that is something that it seems interesting, right? That was something they did to preserve, I guess, preserve the city's ability to collect tax, right? It was almost an infringement on real property rights at the time that these laws began coming down. Now, certain neighborhood associations and HOAs supported that because obviously, if there is an absent owner of a piece of property and they just cycle through as many subleases, is what we'll call them, or rentals as possible, it is a net negative for I guess the cohesiveness and I guess the idea of living in an association. But it's interesting now that when it was politically expedient and perhaps economically advantageous for the city to put that 30-day limitation on there, now he's looking at rolling it back. And I mean, these are tax dollars that are being paid to that are contemplated being paid to private property owners. But now we have a situation where short-term rental laws are going to be rolled back. So who do you think is really going to be incentivized to invest in commercial real estate or residential real estate in these metropolitan areas? Perhaps someone like BlackRock that backs Airbnb and HomeAway and these other large vendors of short-term rentals. I mean, this is real. So is this really a handout to big corporations, right? Big banks from major metropolitan cities to
Mm.
import new voting bases? This is the issue of impermanence of power. This is the issue of the fastest roll-up of power in history.
And keep an eye on it. You'll follow this here at Law and Legitimacy. In the meantime, we're running out of time here today because I do have a hard stop. If you're in Oregon and you're a member of a teachers union, and you notice that there's a change in your dues structure and you want to litigate, give us a call. Apparently, white educators will now will now have to pay more in dues than persons of color, Black people, Indigenous people, as a matter of social equity. And so the notion that the notion that you get equal benefits, or the notion that benefits will be charged on a per capita basis, is now being steeped through the tea bag of this social DEI ideology. And the very thing we've feared, differential pricing structures based on identity, is now becoming explicit with respect to the Oregon Education Association's dues rate. If you're Black, you get a price break. If you're white, you pay full fare. If you're an Indigenous person, you get a price break. If you're a white person, you pay full fare. And slowly but surely, equality before the law bends. And what you get depends on what you are and not what you've done. And social utility scoring shows its face in the Oregon Education Association.
So I want to read. This was part of the. I've got the minutes from the 2023 Oregon Education Association's handbook. I guess sort of their minutes So item 13, Benjamin Gorman, and I know we're running up on your hard stop, so I apologize, Norm. Benjamin Gorman moved that the OEA create a task force designed to design a progressive dues structure for members. It carried. And this is what it says. It's on the screen. Includes a significant discount for Black, Indigenous, people of color educators until the racial breakdown of our membership aligns with the racial breakdown of our student population. We recognize the need for students to see themselves represented in their classrooms, and we acknowledge the vital role of our BIPOC educators play in our union. We need to fund ourselves accordingly. So the motion to approve carried. Division called. Motion to approve new business item 13 carried. Boom. It's a done deal in Oregon.
Welcome to our brave new world, where welcome to our brave new world. What you make of it is up to you. We promise to discuss it here, and to keep the discussion alive. No, Justin, I'm not going golfing today. I'm representing a lawyer in a jam with bar regulators and must be on time, or I too might be in a pickle. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Law and Legitimacy, folks. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 8, where we promise to bring you insights into what's going on in the world that you won't hear anywhere else.
That's right.
Because we don't have ideological overlords. We have our own filters, but we take feedback from you, and we're committed to embracing the world as we see it and as it is, not as others wish it to be.
True story. The last thing I'll say here, and Norm, you'll get out of here, is that we are now going to make it a goal to reach 2,000 followers on our Twitter account at Pattis Podcast. Please consider following us. We need to 10x our current following, right? We're at like maybe 250 followers at the moment. But the reason for that is that we will be able to unlock the subscription tier on Twitter once we do that as a verified account. And we will be able to build an email base that we will be able to use to keep in touch with all of you. So again, please share at Pattis Podcast. We want to build that following. Norm, get the heck out of here. And I'll see you tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody.